Hi, everyone. Welcome to Dr. MC's Self-Care Cabaret podcast. I'm Teresa Melito-Conners, a doctoral level educational administrator and mental health practitioner focused on helping you, our world's helpers. Every day, we have a choice to prioritize our well-being, to incorporate reflection, recovery, renewal, and resilience strategies into our lives. However, those of us who step up and serve our communities in healthcare, education, nonprofit spaces, and more can struggle with putting ourselves first. I've seen this firsthand, and it's a challenge. Enter Dr. MC's Self-Care Cabaret podcast. Here, we have real, intimate conversations with leading experts passionate about accessible, sustainable self-care in its 10 domains. It's all about the hard work we can take on together to find our spotlight. Before we dive into today's guest, we're going to talk a lot about the concept of body grief. I've talked about this a little bit, and earlier on in my eating disorder recovery days, I can really remember how real this was for me in almost mourning the loss of a smaller body and mourning the loss of my thin body as my body fought back really to save me in my early recovery days, and I gained weight rather rapidly. I can remember thinking things like my body is failing me and just being really warped and twisted in that thought process. And it was very difficult to work through that and kind of overcome that. And even still, like sometimes those little shades of diet culture and fat phobia kind of creep into my life. I'll share a recent story. I was trying on a dress for a friend's wedding coming up in a couple of months, and the dress doesn't quite fit how I want. And I was looking to see if maybe my mom could help me make some alterations or what I could do to it. And I started to feel bad about myself for a minute. And I thought, I'm fat. That's the problem. But this time I was quickly able to shift that mindset. And I was like, no, I'm not the problem. My body is not the problem. The problem is this dress doesn't fit me. This dress is the problem. This company who caters to plus size women and women in larger bodies doesn't accommodate my body. So what does that say? I'm not the problem. But being able to shift that was huge growth for me. And I really recognized that recently in myself and felt kind of proud. So I thought I would share that with you. Sometimes it's all about those mindset shifts. If that had happened to me, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago, that would have sent me into such a spiral tizzy of a tailspin, and I would have been doing all the terrible behaviors and more that I was doing to try to keep myself in a smaller body, which is not something that I'm built for, and it's not for me, apparently, at least not at this moment in time. So it was just that little shift. I thought to myself, wow, that's growth. And today we're going to talk to someone who also can share in that. And her name is Brianna Campos, or Bri as she goes by. And I'm so excited to talk to her. I've been following her on social media for many years. She is a licensed mental health counselor based in New Jersey, as a body image educator and the founder of Body Image with Bri. She's passionate about all things body image and practices through the lenses of health at every size and intuitive eating. Utilizing a weight-inclusive approach, she combines her clinical skills and lived experience to teach others how to maneuver through their own individual body image exploration. She specializes in body image education, including her unique framework on body grief. And without further delay, here is our conversation. Hi, Bri. Thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I feel like I'm a little starstruck having you here with me. It's so cool. So I'm dying to know, how do you like to practice self-care?
It's a great question. I'd love to tell you. So self-care is something I definitely struggle with, which I feel like most people in our profession probably struggle with. We teach it, but I'm like, do as I say, not as I do.
Fair.
I would say some of my best self-care usually involves like some sort of body of water. Like I like being like swimming in the pool or hot tub, something like that. Definitely something social, so being with other people, and then I would say like on a regular day-to-day basis, self-care really just looks at like am I meeting my basic functioning needs? Like, did I eat today? Did I brush my teeth? Did I get dressed? Those are things that just help me to feel most human.
Yeah, for sure. Well, if you're ever in the Boston area and it's the warmer months, you have an open invite to my pool. We can do some dancing and
I might take you up.
All
on
right.
that.
Have you ever
I love it.
Absolutely. Have you ever done like water? I'm just curious, like Zumba. I love like aqua Zumba and like stuff like that.
Oh my gosh, love. There was a bunch of my friends who went to a water aerobics class in the city, and I was like, I'd love to do that, but just the trek to the city, I'm like, oh, it's so far.
Yeah, that can be a bummer for sure. But
Exactly.
so much fun. So can you also explain a little bit and like about your business and kind of tell us how that got started and maybe a little bit of your why?
Yeah, so if you don't know me, if you don't follow my work, my name is Bree. I live in New Jersey, recently just moved, and I identify as a body image coach and educator. And I help not only folks who are grieving their bodies, but also providers and professionals as well, who want to be able to incorporate body grieving into their work. And so a little bit behind my why, I am a licensed mental health counselor, got my start in working in eating disorder recovery. And in the beginning of my journey, I just felt like there weren't providers that were able to hold this conversation around body image. Like I kept waiting for the person to have the hard conversation. When I realized that people weren't having the conversation, I decided that I would start having them and realized, oh, I don't know what to say. I'm going to do this wrong. But utilized the same skill sets that I would use in any other context of grief or, difficult trauma conversations, how to stay trauma informed. And just found that there was a great need, and that I knew that if I could figure out how to help heal my own body image, that I would be able to help others heal theirs.
Yeah. Beautiful. And when I ask you a little bit, like the whole concept of body grief, I think you were the first person that I ever, when I was in my own healing journey and kind of going through that, it was your work that really conceptualized that for me, just kind of learning about you, hearing about you. And this was several years ago even. And I remember being like, yes, that's what I'm experiencing. Because I had, struggled with weight for many years, had gotten myself into very deep, dark places with various eating disorders. And once I started to heal, the weight came on with a vengeance very quick. And all of a sudden it was like, I felt like my whole body was failing me is actually what it felt like. And I remember just being like, what is happening? Like what? And I didn't have like the terminology and the concept. It was actually the idea of body grief that really kind of helped me understand like, oh, yes, now this makes sense. This is what's happening. This is going to be a process. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So even just in your words and your terminology, like the weight came on with a vengeance, and it's like, when we can look at it on the on the other side, it's like your body was literally doing the thing it needed to do to survive. Yes. Like your body, it went into a life preserving measure of, oh, thank God. And I think it grieves us because of the association that we've connected to it of what are the things that we lose because of this weight gain. And so when I've sort of crafted this definition of body grief from my own experience with grief, and then tied with my body image experience. And so the definition I have is that body grief is the perceived loss that causes distress accompanied with one's body's changing. And the reason it's such a vast definition is because this is applicable for somebody who's experiencing menopause, somebody who is going through puberty, right? It's the body change that causes distress. And so I think that when we have lived our entire life in the grasp of diet culture, and diet culture has told us you have to be smaller, you have to be thin, you have to lose weight. When you are giving that up to make peace with food in your body, nobody was holding the conversation of your body is going to get bigger. Like, it is a very rare experience that your body gets smaller. Like, it's like, oh, your body may get bigger, it may get smaller. Let's be real. Your body's going to get bigger. And you, like, it's saving your life. It is, you are no longer fighting your body. And so what I found with myself is that there were things that I was too ashamed to admit out loud of what is the story behind my body getting bigger. Because it wasn't necessarily the weight change, but the grief associated with it. So I had a fear, being a professional, no one would take me seriously in our field if I still looked like a before photo. Like, there were just these major components of grief that I had to acknowledge of, wow, that fear is real. And is it true? Is there evidence to support that? And there are people who probably would look at me and discredit me. And what I can recognize and hold on to now is that is more about that person and their experience in connectedness to the world and to their bodies. And it doesn't mean it just defines my body or my experience. But it also doesn't mean that it isn't hurtful. And so I think when we are holding on so tightly to, the thin ideal or all of the promises the diet culture has lied to us for years around, you realize, oh, it was all made up. It was all fake. Like, everybody is going to experience shame, judgment, not belonging. Every person is going to experience hardship, and existing in a larger body is going to be harder because the world was not created for us. But it still doesn't mean it's our body's fault.
Right.
How do we move through that?
Yeah. Beautiful. No, it's such important work. And that mindset shift of understanding that it's not, like, your body is not the problem. It's the fact of these clothing companies that, and society in general, that claim, whatever, and then turn around and it's like, okay, this is a couple, 3XL for who? Like, or we go plus size, we carry XL. What? Like,
right. Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks, bro. Yeah.
Thanks for that. I mean, even now, like, my wardrobe literally currently, like today, I have clothing that's XL and I have clothing that's got a 4X on it. Like, how is that a thing? Like, that's just insane.
Imagine like if our job was like that, where we're like, oh, like, we don't, like, we're going to just make it up as we go along. Like, maybe one day we'll do this and maybe one day we'll do this. And we're going to charge you differently depending on that. Like, people would be upset by that.
Exactly.
But we accept it from the clothing industry. We accept that, this is just the way that it is.
Oh my goodness. And I think for me too, there was and I'm sure this is something you've seen in your work, almost a loss of identity that went along with my changing body. And like, I found myself not really knowing who I was anymore as a person in a larger body. And especially like someone always kind of prided myself on style and being, a little flashy and loving sequins and leopard print and rhinestones and jewelry. And for a second I was like, I'm going to lose that. Like, I thought I would have to lose that in the healing process. And then slowly it kind of just happened where I found my groove again. I found my style again. And then someone actually asked me to write an article for a magazine column that they were working on. And I was like, oh, wait, you want my opinion on fashion? Oh, maybe I still am. Maybe this works. And I was like, and like that, like, it was silly, but I was like, oh no, like, wait, I do still have a style. No, I can't, like, this is still me. I'm still me, like, even in a larger body. But it was just part of that whole process, and kind of in going through that and really refinding my identity in a larger body.
Yeah. I think there's a grief of your identity as well. And I don't know if you're familiar with Stacey Bias's work on the fatty archetypes. And
I don't think so.
And so she has a couple of different archetypes of which fat people usually fall into. And I know one of the identities that was so hard for me to lose was being a good fatty, right? That was all I wanted to do. It's like, I'm fat, but at least I'm healthy. At least I'm strong. At least I work out. And, every layer of my grief, the more that I was like, like I'm still tethered to my workout experience, because what happens if my body changes? That it was another layer of grief that I had to unlearn. Clothing, I think for me, it was, I don't even know if I had a style. I just wore what I thought I was supposed to. And there was like a little bit of a scarcity of like, well, it fits, so we're going to buy it and we're going to wear it. And so now, and especially now that I've moved and I've gotten rid of so many clothes, of like, how do I pick clothes in my closet that I love? And I also can recognize that there's privilege in being able to say, I can buy clothes that fit my body, where there are people that if they either can't afford the clothes that are plus size, or like even being on the larger end of some of the plus size clothing and thinking like, oh, well, what happens if I needed the next size up? But it's all part of that grieving process, which is why I recently my trademark for body grievers was approved, because this concept of like, yes, I accept my body, and I am first and foremost a body griever, that I will constantly grieve my body. And it doesn't mean that I don't have a full and wonderful and amazing life like I used to think it would.
Right. Yeah. The water's fine on the other side.
Amen. The water's cool. Jump on in.
So how do you like help someone get started who overcoming their body grief? Like, is there like a starting point or like something? I don't know. How do you get someone started?
Yeah. I feel like when I started this work of like trying to figure out my own body image stuff, I was a Pinterest girly. I was like, okay, Pinterest, heal my body image. And it would be like, wear an outfit that makes you feel great, and like, I don't know, say affirmations. And I was like, all of this is crap. I hate it. This is not going to help me. And so what I want to say to the person who is grieving their body is, I hear you and I see you, and trust me when I tell you that you're not alone. You are absolutely not alone. And what I want to remind you is that this process ain't sexy. I would love to be like, yep, try my 5-step formula and you will heal your body grief. And you know what that would be? That would be another diet. That would be diet culture. I really think that the key to grieving our bodies, I have this formula that I share with folks. The first step in grieving our body is building awareness. For me, it was building awareness. How do I talk to myself? How do I talk about bodies? How do I feel about bodies in general? How do I feel about bodies that look like mine? How do I feel about bodies that look larger than mine? What stories have I connected and attached to? How am I speaking and communicating to myself when I experience discomfort or distress? So that was the first step. The second step is active unlearning, right? It's not just, okay, like, cool, I know this thing now. And how do we stop doing this thing? I remember it even started in grad school that I used to say things to myself like, oh, you're such an idiot. And I remember thinking like, that has to impact my self-esteem, right? When I degrade myself, even just so like nonchalantly, is there a way that I could effectively communicate to myself like, hey, I'm frustrated we messed this up, without denigrating myself? And so I started trying to challenge that self-talk of like, okay, I'm frustrated that I messed this up. I'm frustrated that this messed up, but it's not that I am a problem because it got messed up. And then realized, but I'm doing it in other areas, like with my body specifically. So the formula is building awareness plus active unlearning over time in community. I don't believe that time in and of itself heals anything, right? Like, you know that saying like, time heals all wounds. Now that's crap. Time doesn't heal anything. The only thing time does is allows the wound to become more familiar. And if in that time you have familiarity and you have some tools and resources to get in and challenge that of, okay, I no longer want to call myself an idiot. How do I change that speak? What do I do? And over time, you'll be like, oh, remember I used to do that thing and I don't do it anymore. That's really cool. Oh, remember I used to, do this really disordered body image thing. I don't do that anymore. That's pretty cool. And then you're like, oh no, but now there's 5 other things that I need to do. And it can feel daunting if you're like, oh my gosh, when do I get to stop doing this body image work? Because I'm done. Want to tap out. And that's why the community piece is so helpful. It's because when you are with and around other people who are feeling and going through the same thing, you no longer have to look for the light at the end of the tunnel. You just get to look around you and see, oh, you know what? I'm not alone here. And this sucks, but we get to sit in this together.
Yeah, 100%. That community piece is so important. I think, a lot of times people want to just be seen and heard, and that sense of belonging. And when sometimes you're the only one that's in a larger body, maybe in the group of your friends or whatever, like sometimes that can just feel like weird. Like I remember when I started gaining weight, a lot of my identity and some of my friendships were built around exercise and like talking about exercise. And exercise was actually one of my like things that I did as a purging method, and it wasn't great. So I can remember like one friend in particular, I didn't see her for a while, and I knew that the next time I saw her, I had gained a ton of weight, and like I was concerned about that. Like I remember saying to my husband, like, oh my God, like, I don't know, it was the first time so-and-so was going to see me like heavier. And he was like, yeah, and she loves you no matter what. Like, she's your friend. And I was like, and guess what? Guess what's never come up? That. Like, we're still friends. Like, it wasn't a big deal. She didn't like see me and was like, oh, what happened? Like, it was like, but I had this like in my head all contorted and twisted up that this was going to be a big issue. And it wasn't.
And I just have to say, like, there are times where it might be, where there might be somebody who does say something to you and you're like, oh my God, and how do I respond if this happens? And what I'll encourage you is that you don't have to have a script. You don't have to be prepared. You get to answer it exactly how you want and how you feel. I am through and through a conflict avoidant person. No matter, how many, self-efficacy courses and blah, 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 whatever. Like, I'm like, yeah, but I don't like conflict. Probably goes back to my people pleasing roots. And at the end of the day, it's like, it depends on how spicy I feel that day. So if somebody's really pissing me off, I might be like, oh, okay, well, you care about my health, but you didn't care that I was dying from an eating disorder. Right. Okay, cool. I normally probably don't go that route, and maybe we'll go more towards the, use my therapeutic skills of, I'm curious why, you would bring that up to me. Like, I wonder really, like, are you truly concerned for my health, or are you concerned for my fatness? But you get to decide how to have these conversations if you want to have these conversations. There are people that I won't even try because I'm like, nope. I don't have the spoons for that. Yeah. I'm not good.
No, and that's very true. And that was just one example. I mean, I've certainly had less stellar interactions. Sure. And even still, like, a colleague recently was like all excited to tell me that she's on Weight Watchers. I was like, oh, cool. As I'm like picking up a cookie in the teacher's lounge, and I'm like, cool, I'm not. Yoink, right in my mouth. And she's like, she's kind of looked inside to tell him, like, no, I'm like, I don't do that. And I tried to just kind of like get away from her, but then she kind of kept going. And so finally I just turned around. I was like, yeah, well, I'm actually in recovery from multiple eating disorders. So I really try to practice intuitive eating, and I really adopt like a health at every size perspective. And like, I kind of just like went off, and in a very nice tone, and like her jaw just like dropped, and she's like, wait, you're in recovery for an eating disorder? Like, I don't understand. Like, what? And I know that like she wanted to be like, but you're fat. Like, how are you? Like, I just rocked like her whole existence. And like, I just kind of smiled and was like, took my cookies and went back down to my office.
And I think there, like, when I would share that I was on a diet, I was looking for people to congratulate me. So she was probably looking for you to be like, good for you.
No, I didn't.
And it's so funny when people are like, when they're fishing and you're just like, awkward pause.
Yeah.
I'm going to take a really long sip of my drink and make it real awkward here.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, no, it's kind of funny. And, you know, I can think of certainly other examples. That's just a recent one, but it's wild too. And once you start to like reject it and push back on it, like the more you see, it's like the clearer it gets.
Totally.
And it's kind of wild. But did you hear the news about our exciting new offering from the Self-Care Cabaret? We're calling it Talkback. If you're familiar with the theater space, you may have participated in a talkback before. After a performance, the cast and crew will come back on stage to chat with the audience and answer questions. Think of it as a casual guided discussion. Inspired by this and by popular interest, we've come up with a talkback for the Self-Care Cabaret podcast. Groups will listen to a podcast episode or two of their choosing, then I'll come and lead your discussion either in person or virtually of those episodes, expanding on the big ideas. It's a great option for groups looking for short, impactful professional development, or smaller teams looking to get an introduction to self-care and well-being. We have done a few of these so far, and let me say, they have been so much fun. So if you're interested in bringing a talkback to your group or organization, email podcast@drmcselfcare.com. And now, on with the show. So speaking of, health at every size, I did mention that just briefly, and I know you subscribe to that. Your work is through that lens, which I love, and that's so important. What do you say to like the naysayers with health at every size? Because I know like sometimes people hear that and they bristle a little as they don't quite understand it.
Yeah. So I would say for the naysayers that you can't naysay what you don't know. So that's first of all. And some of the pushback that I've gotten is like, but you just can't be healthy at every size. And I'm like, okay, but the movement is not healthy at every size. It is health at every size, which in and of itself means that every person has the right to the pursuit of health with dignity. And that should be a universal thing that we all want. And I think that there's I want to say like a barrier, but it's also like, the system was designed this way, right? The system isn't flawed. It was intended to be flawed. That, we live in a culture, especially if you live in the US, where our health insurance is for profit, which means that the wealthier you are, the more health, quote unquote, you can, procure. Yeah. Like it's not a just system. What I know is that in my largest and least mobile body, I am the healthiest I have ever been. And it has nothing to do with what I do or what I am not doing. And I think that there is such a, there's such a narrative that we have control over our health, and we don't, right? It's a facade. And so for the naysayers, take your negativity somewhere else. But I would encourage you to maybe actually do some reading and education. And then even furthermore of if you talk to a person who exists with any sort of marginalization, especially when it comes to body size, we don't want to be treated specially. We want to be treated equally. We want to be treated with the same rights. Like I had a cold last week and everyone's like, why don't you go to the doctor? Why don't you go to the doctor? I'll give you 5 reasons why I won't go to the doctor. But because I know that it's a common cold or sinuses, but I'm going to get a lecture on my BMI instead. Yep. Right? How does that not impact health? That if I'm coming in for something that is absolutely not correlated to my weight, but I get a lecture on my weight as well. And then if I've made that comment before, people are like, well, your doctors have a right to educate you. And it's like, okay, but my doctor's educated in eating disorder recovery. Right. And here's what I know from somebody who has been a therapist in eating disorder recovery and who in and of itself, I believe I've recovered from an eating disorder. Maybe not a quote unquote typical eating disorder, but definitely in orthorexia. Is nobody cared that I had an eating disorder. Deb Dana is somebody who speaks in the health at every size community. And she has this quote that's like, what was prescribed in them was diagnosed in me. What was prescribed in or what was prescribed I said it backwards. What was diagnosed in them was prescribed in me. So I was prescribed an eating disorder because I was fat, and they were diagnosed with an eating disorder because they were thin.
Interesting.
Right? That because of our body sizes, if my client wanted to eat a cookie, it was a good thing because they're making peace with food. But if I was eating a cookie, it was, what about my health?
Right.
You shouldn't be eating a cookie because that could mess with your blood sugar. That could mess with your health.
Right. That's not healthy.
Oh my gosh.
My goodness.
And what we know now, right, is that it's less about, what you're eating and how much you're eating, and more about how you feel about what you're eating. Because if the stress of eating and movement is causing a shame narrative within you, like that is going to impact not only your mental and your physical health, but it leads to restriction. It leads to eating disorder behaviors. It leads to things that should be concerning to our world, and unfortunately are not as concerning as someone existing in a larger body.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I just want to go back to the community comment that you made a little while ago, because I was thinking a lot of times when I present to various groups of folks on different topics related to self-care and trauma recovery, I often disclose that I'm in recovery for disordered eating and exercise bulimia, and I usually share that. And then we get into the physical medical domain, and I usually do my little tap dance around, how there's a lot of bias in the medical community, and it's difficult to get weight neutral care. And I'm like, I speak for myself, and I do this kind of whole thing. Almost every single time I do that, someone or a couple people either email me later or stay a couple minutes later to just talk to me and like tell me like, thank you for saying that. Thank you so much. Like my daughter struggles with weight, or I had the same issue. It's like, so I say it every time because I'm like, I know someone in this audience really has to hear this. And this is usually like to groups of educators, helping professionals, that kind of stuff. But like that one piece just always hits like really hard to at least one person. And so I'm okay with being vulnerable as long as it's going to help somebody. Right. And,
Same.
So like, but I think just letting them like, helps them to feel heard and seen, and to like see me up there in front of them, like doing my thing and being confident and looking cute or whatever. And have like being like, oh, wow. Like, yeah, she gets it like that. Wow. Yeah. Like it's been really cool to experience in my work.
I love that. Yeah. I love that. And it's the same way I feel on social media. Of my social media started because I just wanted somebody else to know, like, you're not alone. Like, if you have felt this, I have felt this too. And my message has resonated with people. Yeah. It resonates because I say the quiet part out loud, and I have found a way through a lot of the quiet parts that I was like, oh, nobody's talking about this. I remember the first time that I knew that I needed a seatbelt extender, but I was too ashamed to ask for one. And like nobody was talking about that. If I were to have Googled like how to ask for a seatbelt extender, I'm sure the only thing that would have come up would have been like lose weight. Yeah. And now it's like a common occurrence that I just say, hey, if you need a seatbelt extender when you are flying, that's okay. That is completely normal. That the seatbelts on the airplane, they are like, I think the statistic is like 6 inches shorter than they used to be 10 years ago. So the thing that is causing you shame, is it causing you shame because it's something you believe or something you were taught?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great example. But then we somehow internalize that and then feel bad about ourselves. And so it's so like twisted up. We need more Brees in the world to help share this and spread this around. And that's a great segue into one of my last questions for you is about, I'm assuming a lot of your work includes a lot of advocacy in helping folks. Of course. What do you have any tips or like tricks that you try to share with people to help, create more fat-friendly spaces and acceptance in the world?
Man, okay, so great question. Follow-up question. Am I talking to the person who exists in a larger body? Am I talking to the provider who is trying to make an environment? Who's
the person in a larger body who maybe is doesn't really maybe know where to start or afraid to speak up?
Yeah. Great question. I would love to tell you. I know that it's something that I feel like Instagram has just been such a great way of bringing about community and connecting. And, seeing if people have programs and opportunities that you can get involved with. My community, we have the Body Grievers, and it's because I'm so passionate about giving people a space to explore their body grief. And I'll tell them, I'm like, if you think that you're going to heal your body image in the time that we're together, you're in the wrong group. Like, this is the Body Grievers group. This is not the Heal Your Body in 10 Weeks group. But I know that I'm not the only one. I know there are other spaces. I think what can be so hard too is that, and what you had mentioned, in the past, the way we had community was through like exercise, right? And so if I were to go back and do it again and figure out like, how do I find my community other than on Instagram and, through these shared online spaces, I would have said, what do I want to do? Like, who are the people that I want to be spending my time with? I probably would have joined like an improv group, right? Like, I would have tried to find community in a way where we had a common goal that had nothing to do with body size, that had nothing to do. I might have joined like an a cappella choir, and maybe not finding people who look, exactly like me or are on the same page. But if we can find a community where our common goal has nothing to do with how we look and how much we weigh, how does that transcend? How does that change the way we show up in those communities? Yeah. I definitely think that like, I know myself, I don't know if you have any offerings where people can connect, but I know I always try to do some like lower cost offers as well for people. And I've had people who've come to those and then connected with each other and then been like, oh my gosh, I didn't know you were right in my neighborhood. Like, I didn't realize we were so close. That's awesome. Even just from this call. Yeah. So opportunity lies everywhere, but I would definitely say, I think as a radical act of self-care, figure out what you would want to be doing, what your most aligned self would want to be doing if your body didn't stand in your way.
Yeah. Beautiful. I love that. I think you should do improv. I feel like you'd be really good. Do you have a theater background? I'm just curious.
I do have a theater background.
See?
Of course.
I think this was destiny, Brie. What, like musical theater, acting, like what?
Of course. Yes. All of it.
So
yes.
you dance also?
A long time ago, I used to dance. I acknowledged myself first as an actor, then as a singer, and was a dancer by default.
That's awesome. I'm opposite. I'm a dancer first, then a singer, and then an actor by default.
An actor?
No, but my whole Dr. MC self-care cabaret, it's me. It's how I show up in the world, and I bring in kind of my theater experience. And to me, it's performing. Even doing this is performing.
A lot of my Instagram, like, I'm very real in my Instagram, but like, I think one of the things that makes it easy for me to run an Instagram or run a podcast is like, I just love entertaining the people.
100%.
I love it. Yeah. We could start our own, fat improv.
Oh my goodness. We should do it.
Let's do it.
So last but certainly not least, where can folks find you online and connect with you if they're interested in following along and all that good stuff?
Yeah, so the best place to hang out with me is on Instagram, Body Image with Brie. I have my podcast, The Body Grievers Club, which is at the time of this recording currently on a break, but we're making a comeback.
Nice.
Haven't been able to manage doing both. I'm very super neurodivergent and like late in life diagnosis, so I'm like, oh, this is why I have a hard time multitasking. So it's good. We're coming around to it. I would say check us out there. And then you can also check out my website, which is www.bodyimagewithbrie.com.
Awesome. And we'll make sure that's all linked in the episode notes, and some of those other things that you mentioned, we'll link those as well so folks can connect and look deeper into things if they'd like. But thank you so much, Brie, for coming to chat with me. It was an honor to connect and have you on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure.
It was such an honor to chat and connect with Brie. We legit could have chatted all day, and I hope there's a pool day sometime in our future. Her work is so important, and helping folks understanding the reality of body grief and working through what that process is really powerful. And examining just your relationship with your body in general is good for everyone. Bodies are complicated. Health is complicated. Relationships can be complicated, and that's okay. And I love how she talked about thinking about your most aligned self and what would you want to do if your body didn't stand in your way. Take a moment to just think about that. And she was great. So thank you so much for listening. I hope you're feeling more energized and empowered. If you liked what you heard today, subscribe and leave a review for this podcast on your preferred platform. Follow along on Facebook and Instagram at Dr. MC Self-Care and Dr. MC's Self-Care Cabaret on LinkedIn. You can also visit my website, drmcselfcare.com, for the latest updates and to sign up for my cast party, my e-newsletter. And if you're interested in having me present to an audience near you, email info@drmcselfcare.com. Thanks again. Stay well and do good.